Hi. Good to see you.
You know, I'm laughing. Yeah, my hair was out of control, so I fixed the flyaways. I'm laughing just because I remember the very first IG live schedule was about a year ago.
Yeah.
I was in Pennsylvania, or no, I was in North Carolina about to do the Pisgah stage race, and I got stuck in this crazy rainstorm, and I couldn't make it back in time. And my hands were frozen. And I just remember that you offered me compassion whenever I was having a hard time making it for this IG live. So here we are.
Here we are. No, what I was doing, Sonia, was I was offering compassion to myself because I kept on stretching it and stretching it and stretching it. And I was like, is she really gonna come on?
And
And
right here, there by
I'm actually
myself.
pretty good at, yeah, like babbling at length. I can just keep talking and talking and talking. But internally I was feeling a little bit nervous. That's
Well,
yeah.
you have a new one coming out this week, right?
Yeah, it's coming out Friday. You've been intimately involved in the behind the scenes of this book.
I love it. Yeah, the Self Compassion Daily Journal. The topic of this week's podcast is your book, and I just finished the intro for it, so it was nice to reacquaint with it. How are you feeling about the book?
That's a complex answer. I feel good about the message that this book is sending out, especially because it's unique and that it's combining these two superpowers of self-compassion and psychological flexibility. And there's not a whole lot out there that gives you the chance to practice these
Mhm.
skills. And I know that your audience, Sonia, knows a bit about those and you use them a lot in terms of your work and your performance coaching.
I'm just gonna stop you
And
right there, Diana, real
yeah,
quick. I know my audience is familiar with self compassion, but I don't think they're as familiar with psychological flexibility, and I think that's
oh,
a key topic.
yeah. Yeah, psychological flexibility has to do with knowing your values and being able to stay present, be able to accept discomfort when it shows up, and be committed to pursuing those values and not get derailed by things like your mind that tells you all sorts of stories about everything that's not helpful towards you pursuing your values. So it has this component that's really grounded in research as well. That is an acceptance based, values based approach to pursuing what matters most to you. And there's a whole like slew of practices around psychological flexibility. And that's actually my first book was about. So this is like the
Mhm. The
third.
Act Daily Journal, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a partner. Like they're like, if you do one, then the other one will help you out in the other domain. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. What do you think is missing in the self-compassion? Like, I guess the more popular approach to self-compassion, because I know a lot of people probably aren't familiar with the research. It's more like people know, like, oh, I need to be kind to myself when things are hard, but that might be the extent of, people's knowledge of self-compassion.
Well, there's a tremendous amount of research. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of studies. I think what a lot of people get stuck in is some misnomers, and we talk about this on your podcast. So I don't want to give anything away to
Yeah.
the Sonja Looney show. We're talking about this week, but there's some half truths here. Like we think that self compassion is selfish. We're worried that we'll lose our edge. Maybe some of us get worried that if we're self-compassionate, we won't grow from our mistakes. And actually the opposite is true. So there's been a lot of research that's shown that when you practice self-compassion, even if you made a mistake, especially if you made a mistake or if you've done something to harm someone else, you're actually more likely to make amends, to be engaged in self-improvement because it's different than self-esteem. So self-esteem is about evaluating yourself in comparison to others, whereas self-compassion is not about evaluation, it's about self-relating. How are you relating to yourself, especially when you're struggling? And when you can relate to yourself in kindness, common humanity, we all struggle sometimes, and then also getting present, having a realistic expectation for yourself, you're more likely to actually improve, have that growth mindset that we all want to have, and be compassionate with others.
Yeah, I sent you offline how I did this massive literature review for an assignment this week. And self-compassion was on there, and one of the cool studies was about need satisfaction. So, like, autonomy I'm sure you're familiar with this, but in case the people watching are it, autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Those are really important things, related to our intrinsic motivation, and especially when we're trying to do hard things. So if you're, like with competence, if you're trying to do something really hard and then you're beating yourself up, you're not supporting your competence. Whereas if you can be kind to yourself whenever maybe it's not going as well, that can actually help you support your competence moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've all had this experience of somebody else being encouraging to us how it feels if we let the encouragement in. And that's actually something that we don't always do. We don't always let the encouragement from others in or even our own encouragement of ourselves in. But when we let it in, it gives us a boost. It gives us a little bit more courage. It gives us a little bit more strength to pursue that which we want to develop competency in. I was just, working with a client. I was doing a phone session. I was driving back from LA this morning. And, we were talking about self compassion in the context of dating, right? Talk
Mhm.
about like sport, dating, applying for a job. These are places where you're going to get rejected, you're going to fail. You're going to have to get up over and over again. And these are all places where actually, and there's research on self compassion and dating and self compassion and job career searches, that you're more likely to get up after you had a failure if you practice this kind of with yourself. Now, what does that look like? Is the second question. And that's what the book is about, is actually rather than just talking about this conceptually as a construct, which is an interesting construct in research, how do you actually do that in your daily life? Because it's not often something that people teach you how to do it, and they haven't for many of us. So I'm curious for you, Sonia. So to try to do it, where you get tripped up, like where it doesn't work so well.
Yeah, so I'll tell everyone, I mentioned this in the podcast intro as well. So for me, it was with technical mountain bike racing because when I moved, I went to Colorado for a decade and I met my husband in Canada. And the mountain biking here is really different than anywhere else in the world. It's incredibly technical, it's very steep. And people expected me to just be just like pro who's going to be able to ride everything. So those expectations made it challenging for me when I didn't have the skill level, and I had to rise and build that skill level, which now it's my strength. But whenever I like ride up to something and I felt like I should be able to do it and I couldn't do it, I would be beating myself up, like, like you're a pro, you're supposed to be able to ride this. Like, what's wrong with you? You know, those types of things. Like, you're being a win. And that didn't help me write it. It didn't help me the next time either. And over time, I cultivated saying things to myself. And we talked about this in the podcast. Like, the things you say to yourself might vary depending on who you are. But for me, just saying, "Hey, it's okay. Like, I don't need to ride this thing every single time. Even if I've ridden this hard feature 100 times before, and today I'm not doing it, it's okay." And there's like this pressure, especially like people who are high performers tend to have perfectionistic, exceedingly high expectations of themselves. So to say to myself, it's okay for me to not always be meeting the highest level of expectation requires self compassion.
Yeah, it requires self compassion, and then you also are kind of using the language that as you said, you're using the language that works for you. And some
Mhm.
people are really benefit from the cognitive components of self compassion, like your self talk. How are you coaching yourself when you're on your bike? What are you saying? Um, we're watching. Did you ever watch The Amazing Race? Did you ever see
No.
that show? It's like the show where people travel. It's like a reality show. It's kid friendly. When your kids get a little older, you have to choose. It's like the space between the shows that you're interested in, your kids will watch at the same time. It's like a very small window of shows.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're watching The Amazing Race, and of course, I watch it with a psychologist hat on, and I'm listening to the self talk. Well, these people are racing around the world, right? What are they saying to themselves as they're when they get behind, when they are feel like they're going to lose, when they're not going to reach the finish line? And there is a dramatic difference between people that are critical of themselves and people that are encouraging of themselves in terms of their stick with it, right? It makes sense. But for some of us, the cognitive components of self-compassion aren't really the thing that gets us. It's more the felt sense. Like, can you find the place where it hurts or the place where you're scared in your body? And can you bring work there? Or can you just sit with it a little bit longer? Or you can just notice it and use the practice of labeling. Like, I'm noticing anxiety. I was up last night, I couldn't sleep, and so I was just saying, like, I'm noticing anxiety, I'm noticing worry, I'm noticing love, like, I'm noticing tension, and just labeling it sort of like a parent that's sitting with a child that's saying or a friend that you're calling up and saying, like, "I'm here with you." So we can do that for ourselves as well.
Yeah. The thought labeling thing has been one of the most important things I've learned from meditation. And I use that at night when I can't sleep as well. But something I learned, just to add even more nuance to this, is like you can be thought labeling, how you like labeling the emotion, but if you're doing it in a critical, charged way, it's actually not going to be helpful. Like, I'm thinking or I'm touching. It's like,
Yeah, tone matters. Tone matters. Sometimes when I do workshops, I'll say, like, "Say your name." You could do that, the people that are watching us, you could say your name to yourself in a really critical, harsh way. And then you can say your name to yourself in a really kind, gentle way.
Is it your mom's voice when you say it to yourself in a harsh way?
The kind way. No, not like I actually don't have a harsh, critical mom, and I work with a lot of clients that do. I have a lot of friends that do. I don't have a harsh, critical mom, but I have a worried mom. So she would say my name in a worried, anxious way. So I was having it either. How about you? Yeah,
Oh yeah, definitely. Parental voice
yeah.
is in your head, but this is totally off topic. But I think something really important is that it can be really easy to say, "Well, I grew up with whatever. Like my mom was like this, or my dad was like this," and then people stuck in that story, and then they never take responsibility for themselves to grow past that. So, like, you're a clinical psychologist. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think our job is to develop a new inner parent as we become adults, and nobody has a perfect parent. Like there is no person out there that's going to say my childhood. Very few will say that my childhood was perfect or my parents were perfect. If they do, I question it. Like really, because
Yeah.
everyone's human, everyone makes mistakes, and it is our job to develop an inner parent, but then also to find people that maybe fill in those spaces for us or fit those needs. I mean, I have a group of friends that meet different needs for me in different ways. You're one of them, Sonia. Like I know like to call Sonia when I'm struggling with this because you're going to offer this angle of compassion. And then I call someone else when I'm struggling with that because they're going to offer that angle. And that's part of parenting yourself, of developing a new voice, a new narrative. And that we are responsible for that. Sometimes we need help. We need therapy or coaching to get there, but not always. And I just find journaling can be helpful because it gives you that distance to reflect and to have that perspective, third, person bird's eye view on yourself and maybe start relating to yourself differently.
Mhm. I'm seeing lots of people joining that I recognize your names whenever you comment or like things. So thanks so much for being with us today, everybody. Um, Using self compassion towards social media is another, I think, really big topic because it is a performative space where everyone can see all these different things. A lot of people like I just listening to and finishing up Michael Gervais' new book called FOPO, Fear of Other People's Opinion, and he's a performance psychologist. And he was talking about the research in performance identity. So, like, people have an identity based upon how well they're performing. So, I think self compassion is such an important part of this because everybody's on social media now. Everybody might have some sort of performance identity with their social media account, and none of that is in your control. Like, it doesn't matter how good of the stuff you're putting out there, like how authentic you are. You're not in control of that. So, it requires so much self compassion, especially among young people who may not have developed an identity or a multifaceted identity outside of the digital world.
Well, it really capitalizes on one of our core yearnings, which is a yearning to belong, to fit in. And that yearning is just inherent. It's innate to us as humans. Like we want to belong. We want to belong to a group. And then now we have this platform that can in one moment make us feel like we belong, and in another moment feel like we're excluded. And we know that social exclusion activates the same areas of our brain as like physical pain, right? It is so painful to feel that feeling that we don't belong because evolutionarily we were designed to belong, right? So social media, I don't think it's all bad. I don't think it's all good. And you're
Yeah,
right.
we're in
There's a
social
lot of
media now, and it's
chance
awesome.
we're using social media. You and I met through social media,
Yeah.
through a form of podcasting, and we've kept a relationship going. So, but I do think we do need self-compassion, and in particular, the common humanity component of
Mhm.
self-compassion when we're navigating social media. Just before the show, you texted me, hold on, I got to fix my hair before I get on.
Yeah,
Right.
there was like
So,
sticking, all these little
yeah.
hairs were sticking straight up.
So this isn't how you always look. Just before the show, I changed my shirt because I was wearing like a sports bra and a tank top, and I'm like, I probably could put on something that makes me look like a psychologist. This isn't how I always look, right?
Uh
If
huh.
I turn my camera around, you see like a messy couch, and I forgot to get flowers in my water bottle. That's what it
Uh
looks
huh.
like behind the scenes, and a big
Uh huh.
circle lamp that makes me look like I have fewer wrinkles than I do. I mean, this is the reality of it's kind of fake, right? It's not real. It's not real. And it is, there's a level of professionalism. Like all of us, we get dressed to go to work, or you wear,
Mhm.
sponsored base clothing to ride your
Mhm.
bike. You're not going in your pajama bottoms. But there's keeping that in mind that everybody has a behind the scenes of their life that they're not showing, or
Mhm.
going the behind the scenes to get attention, right? Like that those are both ways in which we're kind of pulling on that yearning to belong, to connect with
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, something that's kind of been percolating in the background is that, like, of course, everything that you're learning, you're trying to connect everything. So, like, resilience is a really big part of positive psychology. It's a big part of one of those classes that I'm. And you're talking about self compassion as a way to be more resilient, in some of your endeavors, so that you can continue moving forward in the face of an obstacle. Did you see like research around self compassion and resilience as you were writing this book?
Yeah, there's a ton out there. There's one study that is a pretty well known one by Brines and Chen. And they actually went to UC Berkeley students who are known as like super, smart kids, right? And they had them take the verbal section of the GRE, which is a really challenging section.
Mhm.
Um, and they gave them some of the most difficult questions of that verbal section. And they didn't do well, right?
Right.
So they're taking a graduate level, graduate entrance exam. And then half of the students got a self-esteem intervention where they were told to think about their positive qualities. You're good enough, you're smart enough. They were told that they were smart. You must have been smart because you got into Berkeley. And then the other
Right.
half were given a self-compassion intervention, which was this is a hard test. A lot of people didn't do well on it, right?
Right.
Those who got the self-compassion intervention that really highlighted that comment, we all don't do well sometimes. This is hard. Actually ended up studying longer and being more persistent for the next test that they took than those that got the SMART intervention, right? This is sort of the
Mhm.
growth mindset aspect.
Mhm.
So we know that there is some degree of when we're kind to ourselves, we remind ourselves that this is part of being human, we're actually more likely to show up again in the difficult spaces. But I see it all the time in my practice. I mean, I see it all the time with working with clients, just firsthand, and even with myself. When I'm hard on myself, I just want to go back in bed. I don't want to go out into the world. I want to not try for that thing. And it's actually been self compassion that has allowed me to be more successful in my career because
Mhm.
I just wouldn't go at it and I fail a lot. That's
Mhm.
part of it. Yeah.
Mhm.
How about for you? Resilience.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just resilience and how self-compassion impacts resilience for you as an athlete or a mom
Yeah.
performer.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I like that you talked about growth and fixed mindset. I think about sort of almost disentangling from being a child of the 80s and the 90s, where it was like, oh, you're amazing. Like the self esteem movement, every kid is told they're amazing, and every kid is amazing. But if you're never giving feedback that is going to be helpful, then they're probably not going to be as resilient. And I can't remember where I saw this. Gosh, we've done a lot of work and reading and around D20's work and generation, but it was something about depression and the generations and how like the young generations are experiencing more depression in like high school and younger, but like the millennial generation, they're experiencing more depression as they're getting older, as like they're in their 20s and as they were in their 20s and 30s. I think because they didn't actually have to face the quote real world to learn that maybe I'm not amazing all the time, and I think that the self compassion is really important because nobody's amazing all the time. Nobody's going to get it right all the time. And coming back to that common humanity piece of like, it's okay not to be amazing all the time. That would be
Right.
weird if you never screwed up, if you never had bad hair or had dark circles under your eyes or whatever the thing is.
Yeah. Well, that kind of lines up with the connection between self-esteem and narcissism, that those two are correlated. And one feature of narcissism is you protect yourself from that reality that you're human, right? And it becomes problematic, right? So if you are a child of as I am as well, a child of the 80s where we're told that you were special, and it can be problematic because you expect to always be special. And then if you actually make into contact with the reality that we're all good at some stuff, bad at some stuff, and average at most things, that it kind of is like deflating, defeating, as opposed to being just in the recognition, yeah, that's what it is to be human. So
Yeah, I have one more comment before we
yeah,
hop off here.
yeah.
It's around like the people you surround yourself with, because if you have people that are not supporting your competence, not supporting um your being self compassionate, like just saying things like, "Oh, you're amazing," or "Who like, oh, you failed that test," like, "Oh, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter," or This really makes me like, it's funny. I'm in this master's program and it's an Ivy League university full of people. This is their second master's for most people. And they say, grades don't matter. Don't worry about the grade. But to me, that's not a helpful comment because everybody cares about their grade. So, like, surrounding yourself with people who are going to say the right things, but then, like, how do you know how to say the right thing? Like you said to me, I go to my friends for different reasons. Sonia, you're a friend that I go to for a type of compassion, and I've had to work at how I give feedback to my friends when they're coming to me whenever they're suffering to not try to fix it. So, like, the big question I'm trying to ask is like, how do we give feedback and be that supportive person who can help someone stay motivated, but also be compassionate to others whenever they're suffering?
Yeah, well, one form of compassion is to ask someone what they want. So there's three types of responses we can give when somebody comes to talk with us. Like, are you wanting to just for me to listen? Are you wanting me to give you some feedback and suggestions? Or are you wanting to have some kind of exchange or share?
Mhm.
Because sometimes we want someone just to listen. Sometimes we actually do want some feedback and suggestions. Like, I actually
Mhm.
really value your feedback and suggestions, Sonia.
Yeah.
You're in a totally different, we're in an overlap of field in terms of psychology.
Mhm.
We're also in this whole other field of competitive sport. And I'm fascinated by it. I'm interested in it. And I appreciate that analogy, right?
Mhm.
So one is asking for people what they want, what's helpful. If you're
Mhm.
doing that for yourself, it's asking yourself, what do I need right now?
Mhm.
And actually that inner attunement to, do I need some feedback? Do I want correction here, or do I just want someone to listen, or do I want some sharing, some shared experience? As a therapist, like, you don't always, as the clients don't want shared experience. They don't want to hear about, my friend troubles when they're talking about their friend troubles, right? So this is different. But then the other part of it, I feel like I've said this a million times, but you say the same thing a million times in a million different places on these in the world of social media. But is I coach my husband really early on that when I'm contacting him and I'm having a hard time, what I need for him to say is, it's an understandable that you're having a hard time. It makes sense that you feel the way you do.
Mhm.
And and he does that. He texts that back to me like clockwork because he's a good rule follower. I text him, or I'm in the kitchen, I spew all the things that I'm worried about, on a Sunday morning. And he responds with, "It's understandable you're having a hard time. It makes sense you feel the way you do." And
Mhm.
that to me is like the best response that I can get. So if you can find those words that actually really resonate with you and you can ask for them and be direct with somebody, that's helpful. Or if you get that to yourself. So now I practice that with myself. I tell myself that. And it's really
Mhm.
nice. That's my line. Help with me. So I just gave you
Yeah.
my cue. You tell me that, Sonia, and I'll love it
I
every
love it.
time.
Yeah. Yeah, because I actually try to, I noticed the past version of myself, like, of my background as an engineer. Like, I want to fix it. I want to fix it.
Yeah.
I want to help people feel better. I want to fix it. But I learned that you shouldn't always try to fix it. Sometimes you have to validate somebody's emotions, reflect back what they're saying. But there are times when people want you to try to fix it too. And I like that you said it's okay to ask that because social intelligence is not something that we're taught. And communication is not something that we are taught. But I think that those things should be taught in school or somewhere because knowing what to do in all of these different situations is challenging. And I think there would be more belonging and all of these things that we were talking about if people had better communication skills, which is always a work in progress as I put my hand on my heart as I'm always working on communicating.
Yeah. I really feel the first part of effective communication is deep listening. And if you're in your head being critical of yourself or another person, then you're
Mhm.
not practicing deep listening. So if you start there, if you start with deep listening, listening for the feeling that's underneath, the hurt that's underneath, you're already halfway there. And then the second part of good communication is communicating your needs, asking what other people need. Who I'm trying to remember now. I interviewed him like a million years ago, and now I'm going to get his name wrong. Motivational interviewing, Rossnick, Stephen
Mhm.
Rossnick. Is
Mhm.
that right?
Yeah.
I asked him about, because you think about motivational interviewing as always being client centered, right? That you
Mhm.
should just be open and, reflecting back and highlighting change talks.
Mhm.
And I said, well, do you ever give advice? Is that something you ever give? And he said, I actually think there is a place for effective advice gift. So that is
Mhm.
it part of you, Sonia. It's helpful, but it's just not helpful if you're doing it all the time and without having a functional analysis of when is fixing functional, and you won't know that unless you ask the other person, or unless you get to know the other person, or you get to know yourself. Because sometimes we do need to just alleviate suffering by fixing it. But
Mhm.
if you can fix it, great. That's a great first step. And if
Yeah.
not, then we need a whole lot of empathy and understanding, and it makes sense that.
Mhm. Well, Diana, thanks so much for your time today. The Self Compassion Daily Journal comes out on Friday. I have looked through it. I highly recommend it. Our podcast about it is coming out on Thursday, so make sure you're back to the Sonja Looney show. And to Diana, but oh yeah, I'm in there. That's great. Is Wise Effort officially Wise Effort now, or is it?
We're officially the Wise Effort
All right.
Podcast. So come listen to the Wise Effort Podcast, and I actually have coming up this week, I have, I think I'm going to do it this week. Steve Hayes on, who's the founder of ACT with Joseph Sorochi. And we're talking about those core human
Oh,
yearnings.
cool.
That will be kind of a cool conversation. It's a little nerdy and researchy, but I know you like that. So you'll like
I
it,
like
Sonia.
that. And how cool to have both of them because Joseph Dorothy is doing the process based therapy,
Yeah,
right? And Steve Hayes is from acceptance and commitment therapy. So to hear like fellows
how they're
are,
work together. Yeah.
yeah.
And Joe wrote the forward to the book. So
Oh, awesome.
he's a compassion fan as well.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Make sure you listen to the podcast and pick up Diana's book. And we'll see you all next.
Thank you, Cyan.
Bye.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.